Hi, what's going on guys? It's Almond. Welcome back to another Wizard101 video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about cosplaying and dual schooling. A lot of things are going to be nerfed, whether it be cosplaying or quote-unquote dual schooling, because people don't understand the difference between them two. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and like the differences and what is actually getting nerfed, and you guys my thoughts and opinions, because this does affect the content I play. So I do want to talk about it in this video. So if you do enjoy this type of content, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all type of stuff. Join Discord if you guys haven't. I do appreciate everyone that does join the Discord and helps out, whether it be the content or just on stream. I appreciate all you guys. So let's get into the actual video. So if we're looking at my myth right now, and you can see that I actually have 200 damage on a myth for fire though. I don't have 200 damage for myth, I only have 200 damage for fire. And then if you check my stats, this is basically a setup I would use in the raid like all the time, right? Before the nerfs come in, this was my setup at all times. I had the stat cap for basically all the things I needed to reach, basically like almost a near perfect setup. I had Eternal Hat, I had Maya Robe, Aeon Boots, and then I even used the Headmaster Staff, of course with the Aeon Athame, with a Fire Mastery from Darkmoor, Fabled Ring, which is the Reaver, and then a pet for basically setting against certain mobs in the raid. And then I didn't need a stat mount, and I used the Dream Reaper deck for the Pierce. So now that we got that out of the way of what I'm using, now what does that mean? Now to a lot of people, they think this is dual schooling. In reality, this is not really dual schooling. I'm playing fire on my myth. I'm basically cosplaying, because the fact is, if we look at the stats for myth and fire, if we compare it, if you look at myth has a little bit less HP than fire. If you look at the accuracy, doesn't really matter. The pierce, fire does get 2 more pierce, same damage. Crit really doesn't matter in this scenario, and conserve doesn't matter, and pips doesn't matter. The main thing that we're looking at is the resist. I have 72 resist on a myth, while I only get 60 resist on a fire. I do sacrifice 2 pierce, and I do lose 20 HP, but in return, I'm getting 12 resist. So that's why people are cosplaying in that sort of scenario. Why would I play actual fire if I'm gonna get pierced through in the raid, when I can just play on a myth and play as a fire on my myth and have more resist than a regular fire would? So that's why cosplaying started, and that's why people started doing cosplaying in the raid, because you can also ignore all the chromatic stuff that happens in the raid. There's a lot of effects that happen in the raid where it's like it does a shield depending on who's in the fight. So if I'm on a myth and I get hit with the cheat, he's gonna put a myth shield. But since I'm cosplaying as a fire on my myth and I have fire spells in my deck and using that to my arsenal, I'm not gonna worry about the cheat, because the fact is he's putting a myth shield. I'm playing as a fire on my myth. So they basically made it so cosplaying isn't as effective. Now, of course, this does indirectly nerf the dual schooling, not really dual schooling. They nerf the cosplaying strat in the raid, so you can no longer cosplay as much. And this also affects PvP. Prime example is people have been doing Dorm. Dorm is really good compared to regular Storm. If we look at Death and we compare it to Storm, I'd rather play Storm on my Death than play just casual Storm. I have more health, right? Yes, I lose 3 pierce, but what, I get 2k extra health, right? I lose a little bit of damage, like what, 5 damage, but I have almost 20 extra, I actually literally have 20 extra resist than a regular Storm would, right? So that's why cosplaying has been more and more of a thing. It's not just dorms, there's other variants of this that people do. I mean, the Meyer one is like a good example, when someone does a myth into fire. Some people do life into other schools, etc. But I feel like it's mainly just Myers and dorms that are roaming around and causing this, right? Myers for the raid, dorms for the raid, etc. So they basically changed how these stats work now. So if we move this to the side and pull up another image that was sent to me, we can pull up this. These are the new stats. Now you're probably looking at this like, well, this looks so confusing. Actuality, it's not. So if we look right here, it says, oh, let's look at our school, fire. I'm level 170, the max damage I can have on a fire is 195. Now, if I'm on ice, myth, life, death, or balance, it would still be 195. But if for some reason I wanted to do storm on my fire, it's 136. So they basically like nerfed the damage cap of what you can have on certain schools. Now, if we look at death, for example, death has 202 to its own school. If you look at the death category, death, I have 202 damage as a death. Now, if I want to dual school or cosplay into another school, for example, like firestorm or myth, I have separate damage numbers. So if I wanted to death into fire, the max damage I can have is 157. If I want to do storm, it'll be 105, and if I want to do myth, it's 185. So if you're looking at these numbers, every category has its own school. Now, no one can play storm but storm. Now, I think that's like the biggest change now, because especially like in the raids, we do use dorms quite often, right? But now we'll see if that's the actual case, because there's no one that can really get that much storm damage other than storm. I mean, fire has 136, but storm has 207, so no one can be a storm. Like, yeah, you can still probably do it, but you just need more buffs. So you got to think about it that way. Now, this is a really big change. It is a really drastic change for every school, right? But certain schools have it nice. Like, for example, we do use fires into myth in the raid. So 195 damage is still going to be 195 damage if I wanted to do myth. Now, if I want to do myth into fire, can't really do that because now my damage is at 166. And the only person that can have really high damage that's into fire is storm. So if I want to do storm into fire, I can still have 207 damage. So it's really interesting to see when it comes to that. Like, of course, if I wanted to do ice and play as other schools, I mean, yeah, I could do death and like the spirit schools pretty easily other than myth, but my storm is 83 damage. Now, that's something to keep in mind. So you can look at this chart for reference as much as you guys need. I mean, same thing with, we can look at each individual school, but you can see that life and ice, since they're like kind of like defensive / health schools, you can see that their numbers are skewed all across the board. While storm, just being a straight up just damage school, has access to doing 207 on any school. So storm can literally cosplay as any school if they want to, right? Now, this doesn't really nerf dual schooling, because how in my mind, how I think KI is trying to interpret cosplay and dual schooling is that this, whatever I'm doing right now in the raid, is cosplaying. I'm playing a different school in the raid, right? We all can agree that I'm literally not even playing my own school. Dual school per se is if I accidentally, like, let's say I take this off, and for example, let's just put something like this, maybe like let's just fix the numbers a little bit so I can balance them out a bit. So like maybe like switch my theme to maybe where's my damage one, like this, maybe a little bit more, probably a little bit more than that. Like basically try to have like almost near half and half. So if I think I have like another dream reaver ringer here, like this is pretty almost neck and neck. Now if I were to have like the same damage in both of these and still like using both cards at my arsenal, like let's say mid-match I'm over here using, like, I don't know, let's say I want to use a Ivan Storytime. This is just probably not a good example, but let's say I want to go for Ivan Storytime, but then just mid-match I switch. Instead of using Ivan Storytime, I'm using Bernie's Notice, right? I'm using both of my school spells that I'm like basically quote-unquote cosplaying, or not quote-unquote cosplaying, mainly dual schooling, because I'm using my fire spells, I'm using my mid spells. In the raid, I wasn't doing that. Instead, I was literally just only using my Caldera Djinn, my Bernie's Notice, and my Fire Elf. I wasn't using my own school spells. I wasn't using like a Medusa just randomly. I wasn't using like a Basilisk or a Calendar or like a Djinn. I wasn't carrying Myth Djinn in my deck. Instead, I was using Fire Djinn. So it's that type of thing that they're trying to get at, like, hey, we don't want cosplaying, we want people to dual school. Now, people saw this and were like, well, Kaz is just reversing their whole thing of cosplay, like, or like their whole opinion on dual schooling. It's just that people didn't understand what's cosplaying and what is dual schooling. Cosplaying is like if I'm playing a whole different school on my school completely, like what I'm doing in the raid. Dual schooling is like I'm using the combination of both the schools I'm playing on, which is Myth is my main, but I'm also using Fire, so I'm combining both those schools and making a mixed match between that, right? And sometimes I'm using my Myth spells, sometimes I'm using my Fire spells at like basically combination type thing. So that's what I'm trying to get at. So they didn't really like nerf dual schooling in that aspect. Yes, they did reduce the caps drastically depending on like what you're playing on. So you do got to keep that in mind. Now, it's still interesting to see that they're doing something like this. Does that mean the raid strat's cooked? Not really. I feel like I'll save that for like another video, but there is some issues with the raid that are going to be on the rise because of changes like this. Now, it might be like niche, but still there is going to be issues in the raid and just in challenge mode indefinitely. So we will be talking about that in a separate video, but I wanted to get the idea across that yes, cosplaying is getting nerfed, but certain schools can still cosplay. Storm is a prime example. They can cosplay into any school. Fire can still cosplay into certain schools. It's just that Life and Ice have like very distinct, you cannot cosplay at all other than playing your own school. Like they can still dual school, but like they're barely going to be playing any other school. They're always going to be playing their own school. So there's that. So yes, this does affect PvP in certain scenarios depending on how you view it, and there's also going to be some issues in the raid and challenge mode. Now, do I like this change? Not so much as a like person that does advanced combat, because I enjoy just ignoring all these chromatic effects just by playing another school, but I can see why this is happening because they just didn't, this isn't something that they intended for. Now for PvP, it's a different scenario. I really can't say too much regarding that, but I did do dorm for like a certain period on my death. I did do it. I did have Matt kind of roughly teach me how to play PvP. I don't know if I'm ever going to upload these videos because it's kind of too late for that, because Nightmare's Dungeon is going to around the corner, and if I were to upload something like that, people wouldn't understand like how old this video is. So there's that. But to show that it actually does help, I went 10-1 on Masters League. I don't do PvP, and having him teach me and using a setup that ignored chromatic effects, people that were doing vampire just didn't matter to me because I'm playing Storm on my death, right? So seeing all that, I can realize of how busted that kind of setup is. I don't think I have it as a gear setup anymore. I do. So like, for example, let's walk outside. Let me make the setup real quick and I'll show you guys. So this is a setup I was using in like level 50 PvP. I feel like I won't have a good opinion, but I can still try to word it in a certain way. So this was like my Storm setup in PvP. Now if you look, I think I took off all my jewels. I think I did, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I took off all my jewels, but I would have all my pins right here all socketed on, but I think I took them off for a reason. But you would use a pet like this in low level PvP, which is crazy to even think about because you don't have access to brace in level 50 PvP. So people are using just a brace jewel. People are using pets like this where you just get double accuracy and you have pips. So seeing stuff like this and using a like Darkmoor deck to use it at your arsenal and just having copies of like absurd cards, like being able to use Barry, you know, being able to use Queen Calypso. I think at some points I even had lightning bats in my deck because it's just 2 free weaknesses, and I don't even think I carried Kraken. I'm pretty sure it was just mainly like just go for a Triton, use Storm Wings, basically just spam spells, right? I think yeah, then my side deck was just like Catalans. Sometimes I would switch over to an Oni No Death and use Street Sweeper, stuff like that, and then use Stormbirds if I'm doing a mirror matchup. So seeing all this, I can understand where KI is getting at, right? It's still interesting to see of how the PvP meta is going to shake up, but for me as a person that doesn't really do PvP, I really can't say too much about that scene. Now I do enjoy my PvE, I do enjoy my advanced combat, and I basically went over it saying like, hey, I kind of don't like it, but we just got to adapt. It's still sad to see that cosplaying is basically going to be no longer useful in the raid. I mean, people are going to have to do mono school strats, which we were doing initially, but just dual schooling made it so much more easier because you can just ignore all these chromatic effects. Now all you're gonna have to do really is just spend one round getting rid of that chromatic effect that you have to deal with. So if you get hit with a weakness in the raid, well, you're gonna have to spend one round getting rid of that weakness, whether it be you cleansing it off, whether you using a wand hit, anything like that. So that's something you got to be wary about, and it's going to take a little bit longer in some of these fights. Now some of these fights will be dreadful to even talk about, but I will save that for a separate raid video. Let me know your guys' opinions on cosplaying and dual schooling. Cosplaying as in playing like Storm, for example, on my death, not even using my own school identity, playing a completely different school and literally doing crazy things with it, while I'm doing the other option is dual schooling, where I'm having like split damage between both my schools and being able to switch up whenever I need to, and using both school arsenal spells at my being. So there's that. But yeah, like I said, let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions. And yeah, there'll be more videos later today. I'm trying to cram out as much videos as I can because I'm assuming Nightmare Dungeons on Monday. But if it is, it is. If it isn't, I mean, I get more time to work on videos. So there's that. But hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all type of stuff. Join Discord if you guys haven't. And be on the lookout for whenever the Nightmare Dungeon comes out. Will be streaming it over on the Twitch channel. So be on the lookout for that. So I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.